And good morning, my beautiful America, my shining city on a hill. I'm Eden Gordon Hill. Welcome to the All American Book Club. Ladies and gentlemen, we are bringing over to the show a very special friend to the show, Ken Abraham. He wrote the book with Lisa Beamer 23 years ago, this 9/11, the book Let's Roll. It is a New York Times bestselling author, and Ken is known for all of his very powerful books. And I am so honored to bring him here this morning to talk about the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. Ken, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you, Eden. Thank you. It's an awful day in all of our lives, but at the same time, we never want to forget. We never want to forget. So thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. Well, I was studying up on Lisa and I was really just kind of curious. Being on the Hill on 9/11 and then being up in New York the day after and experiencing it like so many others who lived in the DC and New York area. No one can, it feels like it was yesterday, but
Yeah.
I also, I remember picking up Lisa's book, your book, and remembering the words that Todd said, let's roll. And I use that throughout my day to day and my career. Let's roll. It's a faith perspective, but it's also let's go. Right. And I was very curious as to how you two came together during that time period. And if you could share a little bit about your story with
Oh,
her.
yeah. Well, Lisa, first of all, she didn't want to write a book. I mean, she was just a mom. She had two little children at the time. She and Todd had a wonderful life, and she had no intention of ever writing a book. But when 9/11 happened, she knew that somebody was going to have to tell the story from their perspective because suddenly she was known around the world, and because
Yeah.
not only were those conversations on Flight 93
Yeah.
heard by Lisa Jefferson, the Verizon operator, they
Mhm.
were also heard by other people. And so now other people knew that Todd Beamer had said, let's roll. And of course, they brought down the plane. So she knew she was going to have to do a book.
Yeah.
And there's a real interesting story. I don't know it's ever been told public. I'll give you just a hint of it. That my agent, writers, we all have agents and that sort of thing, called and said, Ken, you've got to be in New York to meet with these people. They got to do this book about Lisa Beamer and Todd Beamer and everything. You got to be there. And when is that? I said, it's Tuesday. It's coming Tuesday. And I said, I can't be there. I can't be there. I'm scheduled to speak to a group here in Nashville of young women. It's at a ministry called Mercy Multiplied, Mercy Ministries at that time. And all these girls have been lied to. They've been robbed. They've been cheated. Some of them have been part of human trafficking. Some of them just have gone through horrible things. I said, I am not going to cancel that meeting to go to an agent's event in New
Right.
York. They said, "You're crazy. This is a great story. It's going to touch the world." I said, "Well, if you want to go and throw my name in a hat, okay, great." So they did, and the agents went to the meeting with the publishers and everything. And guess who they called to do the book?
You.
But to me, it was just the blessing of the Lord. I wasn't gonna cancel on those girls, and God just gave me back the opportunity to work with Lisa, and she
Amen.
was wonderful. I met with Lisa in Todd's office, and we moved around, but we met with her at her home because she still had two little children, and by the time we got together, she had Morgan, their daughter, had just given birth to Morgan. So I met with her in her home, a
Mm.
real sensitive time. It was exactly in Todd's office. It was exactly as it was on Monday, September 10th, and Tuesday morning, September 11th, when Todd flew out on Flight 93. Nothing had changed. Everything in Todd's office was just the same. The only thing that Lisa had changed in the house practically, she had taken a couple of pictures down off the wall to put down on the floor level in front of the fireplace so that the boys could see their daddy and keep his image in front of them during those days. But she was great, and we sat down and started talking. First of all, though, I should tell you this, Eden. My first conversation with Lisa
Yeah.
was in the home of the Beamer family right after Christmas. Right after Christmas, it was the first time she'd been together with Todd's family
Oh,
since
wow.
9/11. And of course, in between that time was their anniversary. She's pregnant with Morgan, and then Christmas, the holidays, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. I mean, how's heart-wrenching
Oh,
that, going through those holidays without your husband, without your father, the boy's father? And then she meets with uh, with the Beamer family for the first time, and that's where we had our first conversation, if you can imagine that. And I'm
oh,
talking about
God.
writing a book, so it's like, whoa, man. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
she
How
was
was she?
Well, and that's what I meant. That's what I was going to say. She was such a trooper. She knew she had to do it. It wasn't something, wow, I really want to write a book. And throughout the process, she would say to me often, she'd say, Ken, it's just me. Nobody's going to want to read this book. Nobody's going to want to hear this story. It's all over the news. It's all, people were tired of hearing all. I said, Lisa, trust me on this, okay? They're going to want to read your book. They're going to
Yeah.
want to hear your story. And
Yeah.
she told it with such clarity and such honesty. And yeah, as we worked through the book, we cried, we laughed
Yeah.
sometimes. You got two little boys running around at the house there, and a little baby, a little Morgan, brand new baby. So it was definitely a bittersweet time as we worked through the book. Eden, I've done a bunch of books, as you probably know.
Yeah.
This book to me was a gift, not just because of the story about the agents, but it was a gift to me that I really felt God gave to me.
Yeah.
It sounds weird to say that, but I really felt it was God gave me this book because before Lisa and I ever met for the very first time face to face, we didn't know each other. But
Mhm.
before I ever met with her face to face, I felt like I had the outline for the entire book in mind before we ever sat down. I wrote it out
Yeah.
on notebook paper. I
Yeah.
wish I could find it today. It's a little bit of history for me. I wish I could find that. I wrote it out on notebook paper, the outline that I thought the book should follow. And whenever we got together for the very first time, that's the path that we took on that book. It's just amazing. And I can't take any credit for it except to say that the Lord gave it to us.
Yes.
Uh, he wanted the story told, and it's been a blessing and a help to a lot of people.
What's one story that you sat down with her and was it was it the story of telling about the phone call from Todd, or was it more of the aftermath of her resilience and her faith that really she didn't have a choice to
No,
get through? What were some of those stories that you have carried with you?
the two that impacted me the most were as she's finding out about what happened on 9/11. She's getting those phone calls from friends, turn on the TV, and she didn't really know where Todd was. Todd had left early in the morning and leaving from gate A-17 at Newark Airport,
Mhm.
and basically tousled her hair before he left. They had just come in from Rome the night before. And the only reason they had come back to the East Coast of the US that night was so that Todd could see the boys before he left for San Francisco the next morning. He had to go out there with his business company,
Mhm.
or computer products, and was leaving early in the morning. And he just wanted to see the boys. And
Yeah.
we came home to see the boys, and the early morning tousled their hair before he tousled uh, Lisa's hair. They didn't even really even have a conversation before he left, and then he goes out the back steps and is gone. So she doesn't know, and she's getting these phone calls from friends. And then she got several weird phone calls where it sounded like somebody was calling her and they would hang up and the phone was disconnected. And we think that may have been Todd calling from Flight 93. We don't know
Yeah.
today, but we think so. The other most poignant part of that story for me that I carry with me to this day are those conversations with Lisa Jefferson, the Verizon operator that intercepted some of those calls from 9/11 and was talking personally with Todd Beamer on the phone while he's on the flight with the hijackers, the terrorists. And she prayed with him, and he quoted the Lord's Prayer,
Mm.
which later said, I never really heard Todd quote the Lord's Prayer all that much, but we had just gone through a series of studies at our church where they had taught the Lord's Prayer in 12 different segments. And so he was very, very into that.
Yeah.
And then also quoted Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. Even though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, he will be.
Yes.
He quoted that with Lisa Jefferson on
Mm.
on the phone, on the Verizon phone
Yeah.
that he called from, trying to reach his wife, Lisa. And at one point, there's a point in that conversation that's so poignant to me where the plane takes a violent dip where the
Yeah.
terrorists are trying to jostle the passengers so that they won't be able to attack. And when that happens, he called out Lisa, and Lisa Jefferson, who had not told him her name, said, "I'm here, I'm here." And he says, "No, I'm calling my wife, Lisa." And she said, "Well, my name's Lisa too." How could you possibly even set up circumstances like that?
Absolutely, yeah.
But it was just amazing, that conversation. And Lisa Jefferson stayed on the line with Todd all the way until he said to the other guys, "Okay, we're going to do it. Let's roll." And those words, "Let's roll," live in history for forever. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. What has been the relationship with you and Lisa since you wrote the book. Were you guys able to keep in touch over a while? I mean, it's been 23 years. So, the kids have grown, and I was just watching some of her more recent interviews. She spoke at Wheaton College, and you can tell that she carries the duty of
Yeah,
what happened,
yeah, yeah.
even to this day.
So true. We kept in touch more closely, I guess, after 9/11 for the first few years. It's just exchanging greetings
Yeah.
every once in a while, Christmas cards, and that sort of thing. And every once in a while, I'd send hello to the boys or Morgan or something. And but then as the years have gone by, we've not kept in touch.
Mhm.
I mean, she didn't need me, that's for sure. She is such a great communicator.
Yes,
It
she
was a privilege
is.
for me to help her to get that story down in print because it was so sensitive. And you remember, we started right after 9/11, right after she gave birth to Morgan, which was in January of 2002.
Mhm.
So right after that, we're going through these horrible events of 9/11, and I felt like I was taking a knife and just scraping over a wound that hadn't even had a chance to congeal yet. And yet Lisa was willing to allow me to do that and to share so honestly with the story so that so it could be of help to other people. So I think there's a bittersweet thing there with
Yeah,
when she thinks
yeah.
Ken Abrams, oh no, not him again.
No, but I can't help but think that you were placed there not just strategically by your agents, but by the Lord, and maybe it was, a healing agent, a therapeutic agent for her during that time period to be able to sit there with you and talk through and really kind of put everything out. A lot of people didn't have that opportunity to be able to do that.
So true. And thank you for saying that because two things. One, I tell young writers all the time, they'll say, well, how can I do what you do? And I'll tell them, look, if you're going to help somebody tell their story, you've got to be a little bit of a friend. You've got to be a little bit
Yeah.
of a pastor. You've got to be a little bit of a psychologist, sometimes a
Yeah.
psychiatrist.
Yeah.
But if you do all of that, you may get the opportunity to put the nouns and the verbs in the right order.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that, then basically you just have a newspaper column, and that's fine. But it's not getting to the heart. My goal with Lisa was to get to her heart, to get her heart into that book, and I feel like we succeeded. And it's a great credit to her because she was willing to allow me to take her into those places. Um, and I think it was heartrending for her, but
Yeah.
she wanted it to be done, and she knew it, that maybe at that point in her life that just because of the kids and the
Yeah.
circumstances, that she wasn't going to sit down and write it herself. So they
Right.
called me and asked me if I would help her. There
Yeah.
was a day, and it sticks in my memory more than any other day working with Lisa. Remember, I was working with her at her home in
Right.
the office for a lot of it, some of it out in the living room, but a lot of it we worked right in Todd's office. But then one day we were taking a break and we were out in the kitchen, just had a glass of iced tea or something or whatever it was, and there was a United Airlines plane went over Lisa Beamer's home. And I looked out the window and I said, Lisa, how in the world can you continue to live here? Those
Yeah.
planes going over your house every day.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
changed the flight number from Flight 93, but it was basically the same flight that Todd had been
Right.
on going over their house. And she looked back at me, and I'll never forget it. And she said, Ken, she said, I can choose to live in fear.
Yeah.
I can choose to live in hope. She
Yeah.
said, I choose to live in hope. And if you followed Lisa Beamer over these last
Yeah.
23 years, you have seen a woman whose life was torn apart, devastated by the
Yeah.
loss of her husband and the father of her children, but she has lived in hope, and she's been an encouragement to so many people. And
Yeah.
I believe God is still going to use her even more in the days ahead.
No, absolutely. She's a testament. She's a testament, especially, I think she's an example for the military spouse
Yeah.
because they live that day in and day out on so many
Yeah.
different levels. And as a veteran spouse, living on the other side, you sit there and just say, women like Lisa are few and far between. But when they have that hope, when they have that resilience, they just shine. They just
Makes
shine.
makes all the difference in the world. And
Yeah.
Lisa and Todd, they'd been youth leaders in their church back at home, and
Yeah.
so they knew all about Christianity. They knew the gospel, and they had a personal relationship with Jesus. It wasn't
Yeah.
like this nebulous God in the sky. They lived what they said and they believed.
Yes.
but
Yes.
still, it was a test. Now, here's the interesting thing that a lot of people forget about Lisa Beamer. She had already passed that test as a
Mm.
15-year-old when she lost her dad. Her dad
Oh,
was a
I did not know that.
yeah, her dad was a brilliant scientific mind, loved that family, just a man of integrity and character, had such an influence on on the family, and he had what they I guess I'm not a medical expert, it was basically a pinhole in the aorta of his heart, and they thought they had taken care of it, and the next day they got the news that he had passed away. She was devastated as a 15-year-old.
Mm.
God, how could you let this happen? Why us? Here's my father, a good man who's trying to serve you, trying to live for you. All these things, all these questions that people have. Why me? Why us? Why
Why?
now?
Yeah.
And she dealt with that as a 15-year-old and came out on the other part of that, believing that even though her dad had died this unexpected death, and just devastated her, that she was still going to trust and believe in God.
Mhm.
We see the effect of that years later,
Yeah.
on 9/11. Lisa Beamer
Yeah.
was ready in that position, and that doesn't make it any easier, but she had already experienced that,
Yeah.
those questions that many of us had on September 12th.
Right.
What's going on here? What God, how could you let this happen? Where were you, God? She'd
Right.
already experienced that as a
Yeah.
15-year.
Yeah. Even though he is still with us.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. That's right, and she
Yeah.
has maintained that faith and, has continued to have a
Mm.
powerful influence. So I am a Lisa Beamer fan, that's for
Yeah.
sure. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Ken Abraham, I'm so thankful that you came back to join us here at the All American Book Club. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there to the audience as we never forget and as we remember. I also want the audience to just go pick up the book Let's Roll, but also you have so many more new books coming out. And, I just want to put a little a word out there for your new books that are coming out this
Like,
month in September. Obviously, No Address is already out, but you have a brand new book hot off the press. Can you just give us the title and share just a brief summary about that as well?
oh, sure, it's a book with Sandy Jo Crocker, just like Betty Crocker, Sandy Jo Crocker, and the book is called If Walls Could Talk, and it's a very delicate, subject, but it's about spousal abuse, partner abuse, where as a young woman, 18 years of age, she got married to a fellow that she thought was just this wonderful gem of a guy. Well, as soon as they got home from their honeymoon, he started hitting her, started pulling her hair, yanking her around the house, and all that sort of thing went on. She should have left right there, and she knows that now, but she didn't. And she loved him, and he kept. And after he calmed down, he would say, "I'm sorry, please forgive me," and all those kind of things that we know happen in
Mhm.
spousal abuse situations. And she would forgive him, and they would go on, and then it would happen again and again. It went on for 17 years. They had 4 children, and he was abusive to the children in many ways as well. And then after 17 years, the oldest son took a 22 caliber rifle and shot his dad in the head. It was
Mhm.
horrible. But the judge in the case was so convinced that there was mitigating evidence all around that house, showing there was good reason and cause and all the rest of that. That after 8 weeks, they allowed that boy to be out of jail for killing his dad, and went on to counseling and has lived a great, wonderful, meritorious life since that. Went off to
Mhm.
the army, served in the army. 7 years after, well, there's a cool part of the story there. One of the friends of the family asked the pastor of the son that had been killed. He said, "Is there anything we can do?" And the pastor said, "Well, they were working on some rooms for the boys down in the basement. Maybe you could help out with that." So what he did is he gathered some friends and some other people in the area, and they totally renovated that house in 6 days' time. They took the family off to Gatlinburg over to Dollywood, put them up in a mountain cabin, gave them tickets to all the different things they could do there in Gatlinburg. They had a marvelous time there for 6 days, and when they came back, They brought them back in a limousine, and they
Mm.
had one of those home makeover kind of events, only this was with a tractor, with bales of hay on it. Move that tractor. And when they did, the family saw for the first time that they had a brand new home, that these guys had renovated their home in 6 days' time. And it was beautiful, wonderful. So they didn't have to walk back into where the house had been shot up, where furniture had been thrown through the windows, where the walls were all cracked from, some of the things that had gone on there. They walked into a brand new existence.
Mm.
7 years later, the man who had headed up that project, he
Mhm.
and the mom fell in love, and they got married, and he adopted the whole gang, of the adult kids now that wanted to be part of that adoption process. So it's a marvelous story. It's a horrible story, but it's a
Right.
marvelous story of redemption. It's called If Walls Could Talk, and
If
it's
walls
great.
could talk. So if walls can talk, hot off the presses right now, and on hope, redemption, forgiveness,
Yes.
healing, and God's abundance.
Yeah, it's a strong story, but it's
Yeah,
one we here's the other thing about that. We think those kind of things don't happen in the families of good people,
you're
and
right.
especially good Christian people.
You're right.
Well, we've lived through enough things here recently to know that even in good Christian families, some bad stuff can happen, and
Yeah,
that's what happened to this family. But nobody suspected, because
right.
nobody would have ever dreamed that those kind of things were going on in this fine Christian family.
Yeah,
Future
you're
sons.
absolutely right. Yeah, I was just reading a book this morning, it's similar scenario, but in the Amish community,
Mhm.
that it's not talked about because of the faith, because of their way that they approach things. And I've read that, but you are absolutely right. Just to be alert, be aware, know how your neighbors are doing, knowing what's going on. It doesn't always the facade.
That's so true. And we need to be aware that, okay, there are people all around us that may be in situations where maybe they just need to hear a word of encouragement. They just need
Yes.
to say, you know what, that's not a good situation. You need to get out of that situation. And
Yes.
I'm not a
Yes.
counselor or anything like that, but I can tell you that if it was my daughter in a situation like that, I would say, you get out of that place, you work on the relationship, but get out of that place, and let's deal with that first. So
Yeah.
yeah, and the good news is there are resources available now
Oh,
for,
yeah.
and even men who are in abusive relationships, where they can find help. And every, you know what? Nobody is beyond hope. Nobody is beyond hope. God can change people. He can change situations. He can change circumstances, and people can start out a brand new existence. But at some point, you have to kind of say, okay, we're going to stop right here and evaluate and say, all right, here's where we are. What are we going to do? And Sandy Jo Crocker is one who would encourage women along that line too, saying,
Mm,
knowing what I know now, I would encourage you to leave and work on the relationship from a distance, and then come back if
yeah.
you feel that you should. So yeah, it's a
Well,
delicate, but it's a good story.
we'd love to have her here at the All American Book Club. It'd be great to have her here. But on that note, Ken, I think you're not just a phenomenal New York Times bestselling author, but you're also I think you have counseling in your background. I
Well, you're kind. It's
You're
all
such a you're
positive.
so compassionate. You have a heart of gold, and you just that shows on the screen, but also in just talking to you. It's no wonder you're such a powerful author. You bring the words to life, and you bring these stories. You give people an additional hope.
Thank you, Ian. That's a great compliment. I don't think I'm worthy of that, but I surely appreciate it. Thank
Mm.
you. Well,
Oh,
that's my
absolutely.
goal. That's what I aspire to do with every book I write. And I've had a number of sensitive stories come my way, but in every one, my goal was to get that person's heart on paper so that they can be of help to somebody else.
Well, you nailed it right there. So, for all of those who are tuning in here at the All American Book Club and on the YouTube channel and on Instagram and Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, make sure you go pick up one of Ken's books. Also, follow him on all the social channels and just, take today as you were listening to this special on 9/11 to never forget, but
Mhm.
also say a prayer for those families who've lost, but also to just reach out to somebody today with an act of kindness and an act of love because we all need it. for such a time as this. We all need it. So many blessings to you, my friend. I look forward to having you back because I know you have much more coming.
I'm trying to keep busy, you know. Yeah, one of these days I'm going to get a real job, you know. Right?
Love it. I love it. Um,